Hello, this is Alex Pock, Music Director of the Esprit Orchestra. I'm here with Christina Volpini, who wrote a work for our New Wave Festival in 2019. And the piece is called As Within, So Without. And we're going to be gaining some insight into a fragment of it, an excerpt from it. So Christina, I thought, first of all, it's such an interesting title. How does it relate to what's going on in the actual piece?
Well, first, thank you, Alex, for hosting this, and for Esprit Orchestra for sharing the work. It's really exciting to be able to put it out for new audiences to hear. The title refers to sort of the procedure of, or the construction of the work, I suppose. The piece has this central harp part, actually. And I imagine that a lot of the gestures and the pitches sort of emanate out of the harp part and scatter into the rest of the ensemble. So it's almost as if what's in the core is also, it creates the whole. That's as within, so without is sort of the concept there.
Yeah, from hearing the piece, and I didn't conduct it, Eugene Astapov conducted it, but in listening to the piece, one gets the sense that there is a tremendous unity, but internally, there's an overall unity, but internally there's a lot of variety. And so how did you create the balance between the overall sense of the piece, which is drawn from, actually, you should talk a little bit about it, drawn from Ravel. How did you create the balance between the inner detail and the overall breadth of the work?
Right, yeah, so the work draws on the first about 20 measures of Ravel's Pavane, pour un enfant défunt, which is originally piano work. And a very, very sweet, soft, slow-moving piano work, one that I love very much.
Did you play it as a pianist, and you've just been waiting all this time?
It was one, actually. I did play a little bit myself. I never performed it anywhere, but it is a work that I'd always known this story that Ravel wanted it always played much slower than it was performed. And even a critic once said that it was unbearably slow, the tempo that he wanted it to go at. And so I don't mean to be ironic about the piece, but this work really just takes those first 20 measures and expands it into a 7-minute work. What I really mean by that is it takes the harmonies of those first 20 measures and sort of just stretches it so they land, at approximately the same distance, but much further apart, if you know what I mean. And then I have to fill in that extra space as we move from one to the next. So in some ways, the work maybe feels harmonically quite, or more harmonically static, because these harmonies stretch longer. But then on the surface level, there's a lot of activity and movement in these gestures that emanate through the ensemble, and the gestures that there's a lot of vibrato and glissando, these gestures that offer a lot of movement. And so I think that juxtaposition of the static harmony with the moving gestures creates, to me at least, a bit of a sense of a floating space, or floating in water as things pass you by. That's how I imagine it, or that's how I hear it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. What was the intended feeling or perception that the listener should have? Is it contemplative, or, well, it's a state of suspension, I guess. It's a state of consciousness. The Pavane, of course, as Ravel knew it, and as is known in music history, is a stately kind of a court dance. So it's not your intention to have a court dance, from what I hear. So like, what drew you to the Ravel to use it as the basis for this? piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at first I was even reluctant to share what the source material was in the program notes because I didn't want it to just feel like a reinterpretation of the piece necessarily, or to bring, I guess, that historical, I don't want to say baggage, but the historical, the pavane itself, as you make note of. But I think the work, the harmonies have this real warmth and grounded feeling. And I felt they moved at a pace that lent themselves well to still be stretched further, to really create a harmonic ground that this piece can send up sort of flares from.
Yeah. I get the sense that it was not your intention that necessarily fragments of the original Ravel be perceived as such. I mean, it's not as though you've just taken elements and lifted them and put them in here in a kind of refracted way. You've found another way to use the material harmonically, and between those, as those harmonies move from one to another, there are things happening between those changes in harmony. And how did you organize that? I mean, there are things that repeat that are very recognizable. How did, in a way, the piece is made up of kinds of cells, or kind of, well, cells. How did you organize the sequence of those cells? Like, what's the thing that gets you through it? In a sense?
Yeah, it's a big question. I when I set out to work, try to define a set of instrumental techniques that I use, and I think that helps to create that unified sense, or the sense that certain techniques return. And often they're appearing in new contexts. They're maybe paired, the orchestration has changed, or there's new instrumental blends that are happening. But I do try to start from that space of a very limited set of instrumental techniques for each instrumental family. And the idea of the harp, like the harp, when I first had the score, there was really just a harp part. And then from there, I really did try to work outward within the score and have things have a bit of a leaving almost the essence of that coming out in other ways in other parts, if that makes some sense.
Mm-hmm. In your orchestration, there seems to be like a new sense of orchestral space created. How did you strategize that? Like what ways did you decide on what instrument colors go together, or even the spacing of notes one above the other and vertically? That's a tough question.
Yeah, that's
why you wrote music, right? Because
I know it's yeah, I guess like there is really a lot of there's really a lot of planning I do in advance of actually coming to the score. When I come to the score, it's often I'm looking at all of these handwritten charts and you know, chord structures and things that I've already put together, and I'm mapping them onto the score itself. So it is a big question, but I suppose I treated the work because it's sort of on the line between being chamber music and orchestral music. It has all the constituents of orchestral writing, but it's still a large chamber ensemble. So I write for it in that way, where the instrumental players all have a lot of independence, and I think that is what frees up this sense of a bigger set of colors in orchestral spaces, because all the violins aren't together with bowings that are together, for example.
Yeah. I also imagine when I listen to this that there's a sense of breathing almost,
Mm.
expansion and contraction as the piece moves along. And that kind of relates to the movement of the piece in some way, for me. Is that your intention, a sense of breathing as well?
Yeah, it really makes me happy to hear you say that, actually, because I really love the idea of this music being organic in some way, of having that sense of breath and life of its own almost. And I think like I said, the gestures that have a lot of movement lend to that in some way, but also using techniques that add a bit more what we might call noise, as opposed to, or non-pitched sounds like the percussion or wind players breathing through the instruments, string players creating kind of whooshing sounds with their bows in circular motion. Those kind of things, I think, lend to that sense of organic life and breathing.
And how do you think that your experience in writing this piece is going to be transferred or continued into further pieces? I mean, has this got an essential element in it that you're going to continue exploring? Or, I mean, I know you've written another work for us already.
Yeah.
With the COVID-19 situation, we've had to postpone the concert for this program. But even going beyond that, like, is there something about this is an essential element in the way you're thinking and moving forward?
Certainly, I have a hard time working from the blank page without any prompt. I mean, I suppose many of us feel that way, but certainly having a found object like the Ravel is something that I see myself moving forward with, finding inspiration, if it's in other pieces of music or in the visual arts or even in sounds we hear just in day-to-day life. For me, the piece was a real exploration. A lot of my works leading into this were very process-driven, and this was a work that I allowed myself to have a little more freedom to have even some happy accidents in you know, certain blends that come together, or in the overall trajectory. So that was fun and a little scary, but I think allowing yourself those freedoms can ultimately, you know, bring you into new territory.
Wonderful. Well, we look forward to hearing the piece again. Our listeners have been led to this interview by having heard the piece, and now they can go back and listen again and make some of these connections. Thank you very much for providing an insight for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex.
My pleasure.